everyone. Welcome to our third day of our presentation of YWCA and the McLean County Museum of History, Presence, Pride, and Passion, the Bloomington Normal Black History Project. We are recording this and we have recorded the previous 2 days as well. So if you've missed them, you can find them on the YWCA website at ywcamclean.org/community training. And now I'd like to do a brief introduction of Jeff Woodard. If you've been here for the previous 2 days, it's the same thing. But let's meet Jeff real quick. So Jeff Woodard is the Director of Marketing and Community Relations at the McLean County Museum of History. Jeff has been with the museum in his current capacity for 15 years. Prior to joining the museum staff under the direction of Greg Coos, Jeff worked as a volunteer in the Stevenson Ives Research Library for 5 years. Jeff has worked with the Bloomington Normal Black History to reboot the project in 2017. Thanks for joining us, Jeff, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Christy. Again, thanks for having me. It's like Groundhog's Day all over again, huh? No, do really appreciate this. I'm learning a lot. So I just want to welcome everyone. And for those who haven't been on the other calls, just a little housekeeping here. I'll tell you a little bit about the Bloomington Normal Black History Project. Before the Bloomington Normal Black History Project was organized, of course, little was known about the history of African Americans in McLean County. In the 1930s, Wyatt Wells was commissioned right out of high school by the WPA, Works Progress Administration, to write a history of Blacks in the area of McLean County. And then in the early 1950s, Caribel, Washington participated in an effort writing essays on the Black church and their choirs. In the 1960s, a group that included Howard and Elaine Bell and Joe Monroe and several others formed to collect local history. And in the 1980s, Mildred Pratt began sending her ISU social work students out to tape interviews with elderly members in the Black community. And originally, I think they were looking to document medicinal practices, and they learned that they were getting all these really rich stories. So that effort continued. And a few years later, the Bloomington Normal Black History Project was launched. And as Dr. Pratt and Caribel Washington would always remind us, say their names, say their names. So we'll do that. Organizers and participants included Dr. Pratt, Caribel Washington, Stephanie Shaw, Reggie Whitaker, the Bells, Wilbert Burton, Lucinda Posey, and Greg Coos, and Jack and Pam Muirhead. Over the years, the project members and friends have continued to donate materials that span the 19th and the 20th century. So due to these efforts, the project and the McLean County Museum of History now have an outstanding collection of African American artifacts, primary resources, and oral histories that you can also access online. And these materials also form the basis for the exhibit, Presence, Pride, and Passion, and the book of the same title, which we'll be working with today a little bit later, and we'll do some choices activities from that. This is a eighth grade learning series, and there's a copy of this as it was distributed at all libraries, public and all the elementary schools, and I believe high school as well in McLean County. But this also can be accessed through our website at the Black History Resources page. So today the exhibit challenges, choices, and change explore the experience of people working, farming, and living in McLean County. And that also includes the rich history and stories of African Americans. The Community in Conflict exhibit asked the question, who had the power? Who had the power to define the morality, to gain respect, to instill fear in others, and more? So we're asking that question in a Community in Conflict, and that's also part of the Challenges, Choices, and Change exhibit. If you want to go ahead and put up the first slide, that'd be great. as I get ready here. Okay. Caribel, Washington was named a Museum of History makers. She was one of the first three that was named by the museum. And the other two were Nancy Froelich and Paul Penn. So, who was Caribel Washington? Mrs. Washington was born in January 29, 1914, in Streator, Illinois. She was a daughter of William Webster and Mary Gertrude Williams. She came to live in Bloomington as a child. The family lived on Southeast Street. She had two sisters, Catherine and Geraldine. They were raised with a very strong religious foundation. And the reason being, their mother was the youngest daughter of the Reverend Jeremiah Williams, an AME preacher. Caribel and her sisters attended Lincoln School. They would walk home for lunch, do chores, and walk back to school. And you could not be late, according to Caribel. That was not allowed. After school, they would do chores, more chores, like chopping wood, hauling water, bringing in the coal, and emptying the ashes. Caribel shared with us in an interview that the Great Depression was very hard on their family because their father died at the beginning of the Depression. The three girls were all in high school at Bloomington High. She remembered most blacks lost everything. She said it was a very terrible time for them. A lot of blacks didn't have jobs as it was, and it just became a very dismal period for them during the Great Depression. Caribel went on to marry Arthur Alfred Washington on December 22nd, 1933. They had two sons, John Arthur and Harvey. Caribel got involved in community work at a young age. She was in this informal group of girl reserves, would kind of do nondescript tasks for the Y. That's when she got first exposed to the YW, go YWCA, right? Later, she was asked to become a committee person at the YWCA. She became involved with international services and helped with fundraising for the World Fellowship. Caribel eventually chaired the committee. She would also later, of course, go on in 1955 to become the first African American board member of the board of the YWCA and served up until her husband Arthur died in 1961. Mrs. Washington has many layers of life experiences that molded her into the great humanitarian that she became. You want to put up slide 2? That's Mrs. Washington in the 40s. During the 40s,
Hey, Jeff, I'm not seeing any slides. I don't think any have been shared.
they haven't been shared.
Oh, there we go.
Did you see the first one?
No, we didn't see it, Jeff.
Oh, no worries. We can go back. We can go back to that at the end. But thanks for letting me know. So we're on slide 2. There's a picture of the school children and Caribel.
What school is that, Jeff?
That was part of the WPA education program,
Okay.
and it kind of moved around. Yeah, I'm not able to see the slides, so are we good?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. Great. Technology, right? I say it's fun when it works. So yeah, during the 40s, Caribel Washington worked for the WPA educational program. And after taking on small jobs here and there, Caribel, with the help of her sister, Catherine Dean, was able to land a position at State Farm in 1946 at the Fire Building in downtown Bloomington. Catherine is believed to be the first African-American woman to work there. Caribel was hired first as a housekeeper. She then became the elevator operator for the company. And Caribel didn't like that at all. She didn't like it, and she voiced her dissatisfaction to the management. And eventually she became a secretary where she worked in the capacity until she retired in 1979. Caribel had always been involved in the fight for equality. She met Merlin Kennedy while working with the NAACP. The next slide. Okay. They worked on projects together, including the fight for fair housing with Ralph Jones and the others that also worked diligently to provide programs to hire minorities at State Farm. So they had people that were actually training at night and doing schooling and try to get them prepared to be hired at State Farm. So she was constantly, diligently, tirelessly working all the time to try to better situation for others, whether it be through education and economics. Caribel was a founding member of the Bloomington Normal Black History Project. The next slide. And I believe that's Caribel there on, in that slide. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And it was one of their first meetings, and it looks like there's a collection effort going on there, and that was in 1985. You know, Caribel would say, if you don't tell our story, who will? And she was adamant about that. And she was very instrumental in conducting the archaeological dig at the original Wayman Church site on Center Street with Dr. Mildred Pratt and several others from the committee. The next slide. And that would be Caribel there and Dr. Mildred Pratt in the 90s at the Juneteenth Festival at, I believe it's ISU. I wanted to show that because they worked on that as a committee, and I believe that was the first celebration locally of Juneteenth in the 1990s. And after that, it didn't appear again, celebration, until we had it a few years ago. And then, of course, the pandemic set in, and we did another Juneteenth with the project virtually in 2020. So look for that to come back as well. So she's so loved and was deeply connected to the institution of the church. When Wayman AME congregation decided it was time to relocate from the 1843 historical site on Center Street, she didn't want to move from the original location. We were coming up on the 150th anniversary, and history was very important to her. And she said, if we move, I won't support it. I remember that. And then Mrs. Washington realized that there could be possibly a rift in the congregation and conceded. Her regality was unprecedented. I mean, she was just a class act. So 3 months later, she came to the pastor, gave her blessing for a congregation vote, and the church moved to 803 West Olive Street in 1993, where it continues today. Mrs. Washington had an uncanny drive for perfection. Wayman's pastor then, John Harvey, remembers that she expected greatness from everyone around her, despite who you were or where you came from, especially young people. When you sat next to her in church, I know I did, I would feel like you were sitting next to royalty. She just had that way about herself. She was just so focused. I remember her memorial service at Wayman AME Church in 2011. Retired State Farm executive Willie Brown was there, who of course was Mrs. Washington's, one of his projects, he called it. She groomed Willie and many others. And although Mrs. Washington was a secretary, she ran the fire building downtown, Willie said, and everyone knew it. Not by telling people what to do, but just by her mannerism and the way she carried herself. So late in Mrs. Washington's life, a friend and evangelist Laverne Howard became her caregiver, and Caribel still insisted on doing everything she could possibly do for herself. She just really wanted to be self-sufficient. Even after she had a fall and broke her hip, she still kept going. I recall one time seeing Caribel navigating the uptown circle in Normal in a Buick, and I had to look twice, and it was Caribel, and she was then in her 90s and still driving. She was amazing. Through the Methodist Church, Caribel did Christian social relations and talked to various groups in Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and other places on racial issues to better relations between Blacks and whites. In 1984, she received the Spirit of McLean County Award for her contributions to the quality of life for all the county's residents. And in 1999, she was the first Bloomington resident to receive the Studs Turco Humanity Services Award. In 1999, she was awarded McLean County Historical Society honor for her involvement in the Black History Project that involved, of course, collecting the oral histories of Blacks in Bloomington, of which we are actually using today. So that was Caribel. And I know if she was here with us now, the way we talk about her and talk about her accomplishments, she would walk into the room and she would say, "What is all this fuss about?" She just didn't get it. She don't want people fussing over her at all. She just thought that service was just a way of life and that's what you were supposed to do. So local civil rights pioneer Caribel Washington at 97 in Bloomington died peacefully in her home in 2011 after she had a short stay at McLean County Nursing Home in Normal. Caribel had resided in her home on Jackson Street in Bloomington for more than 50 years. And on her passing, she had requested that her ashes be laid to rest under a lilac tree at that same address, which was done because we know what Caribel wanted, she got. Remember once Greg Coos asked me to escort Caribel to a poetry reading that she was doing at Heartland Community College. And little did I know, she was preparing me for greatness and I didn't have a clue. You know, because if you were one of Mrs. Washington's projects, and I was, you could consider yourself very lucky. And I think I credit my work at the McLean County Museum of History today to Caribel Washington, as well as Greg Coos. So in the spirit of Caribel, you know, for those of us who know her, she would say to you prior to any speech or presentation, or if the pastor was going to give a sermon, she would say what you're going to say and don't be long. So with that, I will leave you with this. Mrs. Washington was a lover of books. So she had these things, what I call Caribelism. And many of them knew her would probably remember some of those. But she would always say, service is the rent we pay for the space we occupy on this earth. A handful of common sense is worth a bushel full of learning. And one of my favorites is, it's what you know after you know it all that really counts. So that's my story of Caribel Washington. Do you have any questions? Comments?
Hi, Jeff. It's Emily. How
Hi,
are
Emily.
you? Did you say that Mrs. Washington was the trustee
Uh,
at Wayman?
he was on the trustee board, yes, right?
Okay.
Because
And
I'm sorry,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to say she was a woman of great integrity and she had a sharp mind. She could recite things out of books that she had read and it was just amazing.
All the time, right? And
All the time.
And I served on the trustee board with Caribel as well. And that's when I really got to really know her, and she really got to know me. And like, again, like I said, I was just another one of her projects. And she kept a watchful eye over everybody, and she made sure, again, like you were just being really the best that you could be.
Yes, hi, how are you? This is Cleo.
Hello.
Miss Washington, remember, she was also the lay reader, and she was very good.
Yes.
Yeah, and so she retired, and I think Esau took her place. And she's just like, he is so boring. She says, she said, oh, she said, oh my God.
Yeah, she did. She loved to read, and
Yeah, she was good. Yeah,
and
she could articulate. She had it.
yeah,
Yeah.
she was full of herself in a good way.
And remember, she suffered no fools. Suffered no fools.
So that was just some of the things that I can remember about her, or some of the things that we could glean. I mean, we have probably a 30-page interview in the archives at the museum under our biographies. And some of it's really interesting how she worked with people like John Strickland at State Farm, and just kind of nudged and pushed all the time to try to develop these programs and schooling for people so that they can get up to speed and be capable of getting a job at State Farm. She called everyone her State Farm children, and Willie Brown was one of her State Farm children. He told me that himself. So
I was going to say, I got a chance to meet Caribel back in the early 80s. I was, and when Becky Hines and I worked at YWCA, and Caribel was a RSVP volunteer. And that was my first job out of college, whoopee. I had my bachelor's in psychology, and I was working for the Y.
yes.
And she made herself known real early, which I appreciated, and kind of let me know kind of how things were done there. And it was very helpful, actually. I just always admired her, and really feel fortunate that I had the opportunity to meet her and know her a little bit. So thank you for today.
Thank you. And I know exactly what you're saying, because when it's happening, it's just happening. But then once she was gone, it's like, man, we really lost the champion. And I remember her with RSVP as well. I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot about that.
Do you remember where she volunteered? I was trying to think. We had so many places, but I can't remember. Probably several places, but that she volunteered. But I couldn't think of where her main spot was.
Mm-hmm. Says here that maybe one of her granddaughters was going to join us today. I don't know if she's on or not. I do remember one that spoke at the memorial service, and she made a point that, Caribel Washington, she had family in Indiana, and they were just really comfortable that, of course, she was such a person who really was self-sufficient at the same time, but they knew that how much the entire community embraced her, and they knew that she had people here around her that loved her, and they were really comfortable with that. I think that says a lot for the community.
Yeah, Jeff, that granddaughter was Phyllis Stone.
Phyllis? Yeah.
Phyllis Stone. And then the one that I thought was hoping that would join us today was her youngest well, I should say that, I'm not sure. It was Harvey's daughter, her son Harvey, Tracy Washington.
Tracy.
Yeah. Tracy, she lives in Cleveland, and I was hoping she was going to be on today.
Yeah.
I was too. I had her registered in the whole nine, but I texted her and she didn't reply back. So hopefully she's on here. If not, we'll let her know that it's going to be recorded. She can watch it.
Yeah, she's working from home.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I had another question about Miss Carabel. She looks like a woman of character. And though I did not meet her, she has a lot of great things that she did. And I see that she graduated from Bloomington High School during the Depression and also worked through WPA educational system. Did she pursue her bachelor's or her college degree, or did she, because she seems like she was just accountable enough to to be a woman of valor that didn't really may have showed that she had her studies done or not.
You know, I was expecting that question to come up today, and I tried to do a little research myself, and I don't know yet how far she pursued. And then maybe her granddaughter, if she's on today, she could tell us. Yeah, that's a very good question. But yeah, she just appeared to be just a really self-made person. And I've kind of experienced that as well with people that I know that um, didn't pursue the academic route, and they knew the obstacles that they had without it. So they were just that more forceful, right, into getting other people to go that route and try to help them with those tools so they could succeed in ways that they didn't. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I agree with her. She represents a lot of women. There's a question, it looks like, on here too.
What can you tell us about her husband? I didn't have a lot in the oral histories on him, but just by knowing Caribel Washington, she talked about him a lot. And he was a very loving person for sure. And it seemed like they took a lot of instruction from him, because she's always have different scenarios where if there's a situation came up, she would, revert back to things that her husband had did. So he was very involved, as far as I could tell.
We do have a question on the phone as well. There's not a name, it's just a phone number. So if you're on your phone, if you wanted to unmute and ask your question, that would be great.
And I'll see what else I can find out about her husband.
Jeff, this is Carolyn Gray.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. Caribel was active for a while in the Curcio community in Bloomington Normal that was sponsored by the Catholic churches. She was on several teams, and I was blessed to be on a team with her and ended up being in a prayer group with her. And I learned so much. Oh, could she pray? Like nobody I have ever known in my life. But her oldest son, John Arthur, was a senior at Holy Trinity High School when I was a sophomore. He was great in sports. And he was a good guy. Everybody liked John Arthur.
Yeah, I've heard some good things about him too. Thanks for sharing that, because that's a lot about him that we didn't know. And also, you bring up a good point that Caribel, she was definitely supportive of the AME faith, but she was also interdenominational.
Yeah, she's very ecumenical.
Yeah.
Yeah, we loved her.
Another thing about Caribel is when she run the elevators at State Farm, they told her that they were going to put the automatic elevators in. And she said, "Me, I'll lose my job." They said, "No, you got to show the rest of the people how to work the elevator."
That was my husband. I'm sorry, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, Jim, according to the that I read, that she didn't, when we mentioned she didn't want to do the elevator, and she said that she's just not going to do that. And she actually wanted to go back to the housekeeping, and they're like, I would, get credit for State Farm. It was like, for whatever reason at that point, they were moving forward, and they says, no, we got to move forward and be more progressive and try to get more minorities into these more upper management positions, you know. So, and that was kind of like the culture, right? You always had to move on. You had to move forward, right? And I think I think they still have that culture where you know you have to move up, and so and that's when she became secretary. And actually, she was doing that kind of work anyway, because even as a housekeeper, they had all of these different um, supplies and equipment and stuff that you had to keep track of, and she was doing all of that, you know, because that's how she ran things. And like Mr. Brown said, Willie Brown said that it she ran the fire building, and everybody knew it. And it was not by telling everybody what to do, it was just how she carried herself and was orderly and just made sure that everything was covered. And I could see her doing that.
You know, when she spoke with authority. You didn't have to know who she was. You didn't have to know a thing about her. When you heard her voice speak, you know that was it.
Right? Yeah, I could remember being in the car with her for the first time, you know, and I think they just kind of set me up, you know. This is, well, you know, the weather's bad. They wanted me to take her and to give her a ride out to Heartland Community College and do these poetry readings. I think it might have been Black History Month or something like that. So there's just, here it is, little old me in Caribel, Washington in my car, and we drive out there, and then she does these readings, and I'm thinking to myself, who is this lady? You know?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
And-
I never will forget that.
Jeff, this is Cleo.
Hey, Cleo.
So, and she spoke, you know, she had the two sons, John Arthur and Harvey, and she always spoke so highly of Harvey. She just always just tell me he's a good man. You know, I mean, it just was, when she would say that, you just knew it, you know, you felt it. He was a good man. He was a good father, because
Yes.
he raised his two kids, Tracy and Brian. And he was so mannerable, and always just, he was like, you know how you call your mother mother? When he said it, maybe not so much saying what he said, but how he carried himself and treated her, it was like she was mother dear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He brought great joy to her.
And she was
And
alone.
then Miss Washington, you know, then go ahead.
Hello? This
Hello.
is Tracy. Can everybody hear me? Hi.
Yes,
Hi,
we can hear you,
Tracy.
Tracy.
I've been trying to figure out how to unmute this. I was just trying to figure out how to unmute this call for the longest. I was on Google and everything. So I'm glad I'm in the, you can hear me, but I'm on.
All right,
Okay,
Tracy.
I'm
Talk about your
how's
grandmother.
everyone? I mean, just listening to you all talk about my grandmother and my father. I mean, I feel them, like I so miss them. I miss them so much. But everything that you said about my grandmother is on point. She said what she meant, and she meant what she said. I used to go visit her all the time. What can I say? She was funny. She didn't play games, but she had love for everybody. But she even though she just said what she said. That was just her. She used to tell me, don't be so heavenly bound that you're not no earthly good. She was just well-rounded. And I always took that from her because, you know, I mean, my grandmother could talk about, if I could be general, my grandmother could talk about the saints, and she could talk about, put it like this, I didn't know anything about the red light district until my grandmother told me about it, just in conversation. So she's, I mean, the reading, like somebody mentioned her reading, my grandmother was always in a book. Up until her like last day, my grandmother stopped driving a car in her 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because it was a situation at the store one time. And I don't know if she just kind of lost her balance or she just didn't realize where she was for the moment. And so she was just like, I'm not going to drive a car anymore. But I mean, she drove until 90 something years old. I mean, like my father, oh my God, I miss them. I feel them too right now as I'm even talking, but I don't know. Like, I just love being around her, and everybody that knew my grandmother, nobody had anything bad to say about my grandmother. And ultimately, I never really heard my grandmother speak bad about a person. You could ask her about anything and she could tell you, just to listen to her talk. I don't know. It's so many things I can say. I don't know. You could ask me a question, but
Thank you.
I know her probably on a different level. That was just granny.
Mm-hmm. Did Tracy, did she ever talk about when she was younger, and it appears that she liked to go to dances, because I know when your grandfather was alive, there was no dancing.
708.
The guys could not come around and ask the girls to dance. And
Well, my grandmother and her sisters, they were very close. So, in listening to her talk, they were all, and Gwen, they were very close, and they were always together, like even up until like family functions. But she used to just tell me how they used to used to live life. They used to go out of town. I mean, they were each other's best friends. I mean, I'm sure they had other outside friends, but they used to go out of town together. They used to dance, go to parties together. I could only imagine. I mean, I never met my grandmother's mother, but I can only imagine if my grandmother was like she was, I could only imagine how her mother was. It's just a lot of history there, I don't know. And like, even like my grandfather, of course, I never met him. My grandmother told me, I do recall a story how my grandmother told me how, I heard somebody mention her house, how she's been there for so long. And she acquired that house it was a story behind it. And I cannot remember the whole story, but my grandmother bought that house for like, I don't know how she got it, but it was like, I think it was like $100. It was something crazy. It was a weird story. But she had taken that house by herself on her own, in her own name, from whomever or however, for like $100. I don't know. Like, I just used to, at first when we were little, and I stayed in Bloomington for a brief time, and I'm from Chicago, so that was quite different. But as I got older, it seemed like I couldn't stop coming to Bloomington. I was always at my grandmother's house. I was always cooking. We were always barbecuing. As I got older, we looked forward to family functions, especially when my father moved down there. So I don't know. I miss it. I do miss Bloomington. I miss them terribly, but they're here in spirit.
Thank you so much for sharing. And you're always welcome when you come to Bloomington to come to the McLean County Museum of History, and we will have some oral histories. Actually, we do have some oral history that's available to you on our website. And I went through about 20 pages last night, and I was like, man, what a thing, man. With some of the things that she talked about, because you're talking about a woman that lived through 6 wars, Jim Crow, civil rights, you name it. And some of the things that she talked about in these interviews just covered anything from social, political, economic, history of the county. And she just had it all in her head. It was amazing. Amazing. Anybody else have questions? There was a question earlier about if we knew anything more about your grandfather. Can you tell us a little bit about him? A little more, Tracy?
I really can't tell you anymore. Well, I do know that, not that my grandmother didn't talk about him, but I mean, he had passed away a long time, way before I was ever born. But I do know that my grandfather and my aunt, my grandmother's sister, Catherine, they were brothers. So her husband and my grandfather were brothers. So brothers married sisters.
Oh, I didn't know that, Tracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Catherine's husband, and actually, they were brothers married sisters, and it's a small world because actually my grandfather on my mother's father is actually indirectly kind of related to them in some form of fashion, like I don't know how. I will have to talk to my mother again about this now that it's all coming up. But they kind of like connected somehow. So, and again, no, that's not how my father and mother met through them or anything. But it somehow or another, my grandfather on my mother's side is related to them in some form or fashion. I just don't know how. I have to talk to my mother about that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, I understand. So your grandparents were they from Streeter, or did they migrate to from the South at that point?
I don't know. I don't know.
Tracy, from what I remember, Miss Washington talking,
That
yeah,
she was.
they
I
were
thought she was always
they-
from Bloomington.
from Streeter in Bloomington.
Right.
Maybe
What's that? I've always known my grandmother to be in Bloomington. What that other name kind of remotely, I mean, it sounds familiar to me, but I've always known Bloomington. So I don't know anything other than Bloomington.
Okay.
I don't know.
I remember hearing about Kentucky. I don't know if if she had some relatives or back, in Kentucky. I thought I heard her talk about Kentucky one time. That's research.
I don't know.
Well, she could. I like the way she would talk about Mr. Washington. I don't remember in particular, but she would say, Mr. Washington, Mr. Washington. So I got a feeling that Mr. Washington, hey, he was somebody to be honored with being Mr. Washington. From her point of view, that's how that was how she respected him and looked up to him, Mr. Washington.
Well, one thing my grandmother did say about him. Now that you say something about that, I mean, I guess my grandmother and grandfather, they were no different than anyone else. I mean, how can I put this? My grandmother definitely kept that family together. I'm going to say that. Okay. For what it's worth.
That's all it's worth. That's big.
For what it's worth. And regardless, good, bad, or indifferent, whatever happened, it never went outside that house.
Okay.
But yeah, my grandmother, she ran that well too. She ran that marriage well too. I'll say that.
What a great family. I'll say that.
And
Say that.
so, did you ever go? Did you ever attend any of the annual conferences of the AME Church?
Me?
No, Jeff.
Yes, can we go? Oh.
Not outside of Bloomington, no.
Okay. So I used to love going to the conferences when she would go because she knew the AME Church better than the bishop. Okay. And I loved sitting next to her when we would go because I think one time she maybe rode with Esau and I, but she, she just has so much knowledge as we've already talked about. And I tell you, Emily, I don't know if Emily even realized that she really admired Emily Bell because of the way Emily conducted herself. It was, what she had accomplished in her young years, and maybe some of the things that Emily had accomplished was, outside of her civic duties, Mrs. Washington's civic duties and things that she did. Maybe to see Emily so much later on in life to accomplish what Emily accomplished on her job. Okay. And so she was always proud of that. At least she expressed that to me. Emily Bell.
Thank you. I have her in high esteem. So that's really refreshing to hear.
Uh-huh.
Yes, Emily, it sounds like you were one of her projects as well.
Definitely. And one of the things that I was going to point out when I asked you about her serving on the trustee board, that's been kind of a common theme through the 3 historians that we've heard about in the last 3 days.
Yes.
They're with the AME Church and the trustee board.
Yeah, the trustee board, AME Church, the Republican Party of Lincoln. Yeah, You're absolutely right. There's power in that. Would anything else? Anybody else add anything else while we have Tracy on the line here? Anyone?
Tracy.
Yes.
Tracy, how old
Yes,
were
I'm
you?
here.
How old were you when, I mean, how old were your grandma when you all came to live with her for that little bit of time?
I want to say she was probably in her 60s, honestly. Well, let me see. I'm gonna probably date myself, so I'm 47, and I came to stay. I stayed there briefly. I think when I was 11, because my brother Brian stayed there a little bit longer. So I probably stayed about a year. I went there and I stayed there. I graduated from my 8th grade there from St. Mary's.
So how was it
And then,
at her age, you know, handling you two young kids, keeping you under control?
Like I said, she didn't play. Like she didn't let us watch TV. But she loved to play what's that called? That Pokino. Loved to play. Her and my they had like a ladies' day on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. So if we were ever left at home, she said, "Don't turn on that TV."
Okay.
So of course we got some frozen meat out the freezer and put it on top of the TV so she wouldn't find out. We watched it a little bit.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, we on Sundays after church, we would always go over my Aunt Catherine's house, and again they would play triomino, and we probably eat dinner over there, or vice versa. I mean, she was at that time, of course, we're young, so yeah, you appreciate it, but again, I was from Chicago, I was from the city, so I was really not used to Bloomington at all. I don't think I ever got used to Bloomington. So after my 8th grade, I left and came back, up. Well, at that time, I stayed with my father after that. But yeah, I mean, she would make us, she would take us to the laundromat. Now we got a quarter. I mean, she would give us money, but we had to work for it. Whether I was curling her hair, or because at that time it was $1.25. Today it's $1,000 to get your hair done. But she would say, "All right, do my hair. I'll give you $1.25, so I won't have to go to the beauty school." Because I was very much so into hair, and even at a young age, I could do it well. We would go to Quick Bite. I used to love Quick Bite. So I'm not sure if they had special days or whatever, but one day out the week, that would be a little treat. So we would go to Quick Bite, and she would buy one meal, and everybody would she would buy a meal, and then she would split a meal, and everybody kind of got their favorite. So that was like a little treat. She was one of those ones that she didn't really ask you too much what you wanted for dinner, is what's on the table, or don't eat nothing. But she wasn't going to have us starve. So, we did have our little special breakfast every now and then. So that was a treat. I mean, she was a regular grandmother. She just didn't play any games. If she said no, she meant no. She had a yardstick, and she moved kind of quickly too, to be 60. So, I don't know. It was good. Again, I was only there for a small amount of time, but like I said, in my adult years, I was in Bloomington quite often. Because at that time, before I moved to Cleveland, because I moved to Cleveland a couple of years ago, but at that time I was living in the south suburbs of Chicago. So I would come down there to see her maybe once a month, maybe twice, especially after my father passed away.
Well, Tracy.
And I mean, those were probably some of my best times.
Tracy, what happened to all of Mrs. Washington's beautiful antiques? I mean, she had some antique furniture, dishes. She had what happened?
Well, early on, honestly, my grandmother started giving me things. So I'm just saying, and I can't really speak for everybody else, but if I seen a pot or like a cast iron skillet, I'd be like, "Grandma, I want this." She'd be like, "All right, take it." So like pictures, like birth certificates, just any kind of little thing that I saw that it was, that was a remembrance. I took, in the latter years, I took it. I think like a couple of my cousins might have had, you know, might have taken some things as well. But I know from my jewelry, when my grandmother, you know, kind of like in her last days or whatever, my oldest cousin, Phyllis, she had something to do with that. I don't know what she really did with it per se. I don't know if she used it. I don't really know what she did with it, but I do know that she took that and did something with it. And then, I mean, pretty much everybody kind of got what they wanted, you know, out of the house per her. But I didn't necessarily, I wanted keepsakes. I don't even know if my brother took anything, to be honest with you. But yeah, then my older cousins, they kind of, you know, because it's me and my brother, and then we have four other, like my Uncle John's kids. They're a lot older than us. So me and my brother are the youngest. And then they are like, my oldest cousin might be like 20 years older than me, or maybe slightly thereunder. So she was kind of like the head and kind of in charge to kind of how to kind of maneuver things in that aspect. So everybody kind of just fell under her lead. I'm surprised she wasn't on the call, or, you know, but because she probably would have had more information.
Yeah, she had a lot of information.
Tracy, this is Jeff. I was just wondering, so you graduated from 8th grade from St. Mary's?
Mm-hmm.
Now, were there, do you remember or can you recall there were other Black students like yourself or Hispanic students that you knew?
Yes. It wasn't a lot of Blacks, but it was a Hispanic girl that I was very, very, very cool with. Her name was Patty Sandoval. There was a guy, I cannot think of his name. So it was a Black guy that was there, and then it was me. It was my brother. But it wasn't a lot of Blacks that went to St. Mary's at that time.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. What a pleasant surprise.
Yes.
You know?
Can I jump in real quick and just I had the time to actually look at some of the mchistory.org website. This is to where the McLean County Museum of History, and it has a few interviews in here with Caribel Washington.
Mhm.
And I am so impressed with this young lady. God rest her soul. She made her mark. And that to me speaks volumes, because that means that you know what your purpose is, and she went forward with that. And just to say some of the things on here, like she says, I was connected with the YWCA, and the women were very adamant about attempting to secure Black saleswomen in stores or to open up for the lunch counters and restaurants to Black people. Up until that time, I quote, they were not able to go in and sit down and enjoy a meal unless they were with someone white. One was never, to my knowledge, refused if they were with a white person. Otherwise, they could not eat. All of that changed, of course, with the sit-ins and the marches, all of the protests that happened during Martin Luther King's time until the Civil Rights Act passed. Of course, that then changed a great many things. And then the Equal Opportunity Program and pretty much opened the door for work for people, because they were no longer required to ask the race questions any way in any employment. So she, being that she was a board member with the YWCA here in Bloomington as well, and she understood the movement and to be on the front line of some of that, it's very, very noble characteristics in Tracy. And I, God bless you guys, because you have in our community, we call her a queen. So she was really, really, really very outstanding is a good word. Another quote that she had in here, she just says, one of the nicest parts of being in the YWCA is that you were not only involved as a local person, you were involved as a national person, and even as an international person. And this was the time where there was really big people of New York who did great things for the YW. And she said that she actually quote, she did receive an exceptional award from the Rockefeller Center. And that was she said that was a beautiful time at that time. And she also had lunch with Dr. Ralph Blunch and Henry Cabot Lodge. Can you imagine that? You guys, that alone is, that shows her character. To receive a recognition at the Rockefeller Center by the YWCA USA. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have and to see. That's just a snippet of what's in here on this website. So if you guys get a chance, we'll also put some information on our YW website as well. But this is just a piece of her interview from 2002 and then also from January of 1986.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you, Tiffany.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, like I've been saying all week, I said, I was actually a little intimidated. I said, I'm expected to speak on Caribel's life in 15 minutes. And it was just so much, it's so vast. It's like, wow, it's incredible. And again, like I said, she wrote the book, basically. She wrote the book. We had a question from Don. If Miss Washington was so integrally involved with AME Church, how and why did she choose to send children and grandchildren to Catholic schools? I think I spoke to that earlier, and I mean, this is just my assumption. Mrs. Washington was heavily involved in the AME faith, but at the same time, she was interdenominational.
I can speak on my behalf. The reason why my grandmother sent me and my brother is because that was my mother and father's directive. So she was just following a request by my parents at the time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that answers that, Don. Thank you so much.
And we are at the time that my parents were Catholic. So, I mean, she just made sure that, when Lent came that, we followed the traditions. And again, like she followed just the request of my mother and father. So
that's understandable.
I don't know about her sons because they went to Catholic school too, but I mean, I don't know.
Well,
education is education. So she, my grandmother is big on education. So I don't know. That's a good question.
So do you think that at that time, even though AME Church offered, we didn't have a school to go to attend. So they went to church. But they still attended the AME Church as well as the Catholic church or school, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. They did.
Mm-hmm. So they got both.
Correct.
Right. That's like when I was growing up as a little kid. My father's family, they were Baptists, and my mother's family was, well, for that little time that I lived in Tennessee, there was no AME church. There was CME. Mm-hmm. And the CME, I understand, should be like what, Christian Methodist? But in Tennessee, the white people refer to it as colored Methodists. Okay. So I grew up in both, the Baptist, the country rural Baptist church and the CME church. And then when I became old enough to make my own choices, that's when I joined with the AME church, because just from the CME church was more like the AME church. So I just stayed on over on that side rather than become a Baptist. Still a Christian.
This is Beverly. I can speak to that a little bit. I think I mentioned on Tuesday that I grew up in Chicago in the 1950s and 60s, and I went to Catholic grade school and high school. And the thought was that you got a better education at Catholic schools at that time. At least that was the thought in my community. Also, the Catholic school believed in discipline.
Yep.
And so that was for my parents an extension of what was going on in the household, that, you know, with discipline was in the household and you can get it at school as well. And so, and like some others have said, I grew up in a Baptist household. My parents and grandparents and everybody was Baptist, but here I am going to a Catholic school, and there were some rules and regulations that you had to follow. So I went to mass early on Sunday morning, and then I came home and went to service with my parents at the Baptist church. For a brief period of time early on, I did become Catholic, but then I converted to the Baptist faith in 1971. But it was just, like I said, that thought process that you got a better education at the Catholic schools, and there was going to be some discipline involved.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, my wife is from a Baptist background as well as myself, and she attended the Catholic schools. And also, if we remember a couple days ago from this series when we talked about Dr. Eugene Covington um, in Virginia, he went to, of course, a black school. There was 14 white schools and 7 black schools. But because he excelled so well and did well in class, someone suggested that he go to a Catholic school, and his parents allowed him to go, and neither of them were Catholic. And that was in 1890s, so 1880s.
Yeah, I grew up the same way. I went briefly to a Catholic school in Decatur, Illinois, and it was to further my education. It was to be the better education for myself as well. And I myself, I grew up non-denomination. So but my grandmother was Baptist, and when we moved to Decatur during the migration from Tennessee on to Decatur, Illinois, because of better jobs like Caterpillar, ADM, all of those things. My grandmother, I remember my grandmother also saying that, you know, you'll get better education at the Catholic school. She talked me into it. And I actually did it for about a couple semesters, and I couldn't do it anymore after that, you guys. But I did graduate from MacArthur High School. And I did it because of athletic reasons. In the Catholic schools, you didn't have what they call title divisions, and because of my track background and my basketball, I went back into the public school and was able to succeed there. But yes, that is the known thing in the community, is that Catholic education was better. Totally agree with everybody.
Oh, and this is Cleo. One of my friends grew up in Chicago and went to Catholic schools. And when she graduated, well, she came down here to ISU and graduated, and she thought that she was going to go to the Catholic church there on College Avenue. I forget the name of that one. But she said that she was received she wasn't received well. So that's when she joined Mount Pisgah Baptist Church. But she tried to go to the Catholic church down here, but it was not. Because see, in Chicago, I know one of the Catholic churches that some of my friends attend, they're like, there's so many blacks there. You know, it's a lot of black people that go to the Catholic church in Chicago or larger cities. But yeah, so she said she was not, she didn't feel welcome at the Catholic church here, even though she grew up in the Catholic church, went to school, and so she just left. And she just said she went there a few times and she just didn't feel it. That was here in Bloomington normal.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry, was I muted? Did you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought I was, okay.
Yeah, I'd like to have this turn out to be what it is, a conversation. We thought all along that we will hopefully be able to, shed a little bit of knowledge and glance into some local histories, but at the same time, just have a conversation among a diverse group of people. And it looks like there's 26 people on here, and I'd love to hear from someone else. Anybody got any questions for Tracy or myself or?
Oh, Jeff,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
know I'm talking more. I'm still talking, but you were at her memorial, Mrs. Washington memorial, right?
Yes.
Okay, remember how the fellowship hall was all set up with her life? You
And
remember going upstairs?
the photos and all that? Yes.
Right, and all her accomplishments, her awards and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Emily Bell was one who was instrumental in doing that. Emily knew about awards that some of her family didn't even know. Because I remember Emily would ask me, go to Mrs. Washington's house and get this award. Asked her granddaughters for this award. And I go to the house, I think I made 2 or 3 trips going back and forth, getting these different awards because Emily knew about them so that we could put them on display.
I remember it was a beautiful display.
It was a beautiful display.
I learned a lot. It was overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Overwhelming.
And then I'll add to that, and I'll be off. Emily also was instrumental in, and some of the other church members as well, is doing that. So I don't know if you attended Esau's memorial, my husband Esau, but they did the same thing, and it was beautiful. I would want that for me, even if you're still on, that's what I want, okay?
I agree with you, Cleo. We'll make sure it happens, but we're not looking for it anytime soon, just so you know.
No, not anytime soon. As a matter of fact, Tiffany, I was going to call you so we can start planning my 75th birthday party like the one we had for my 70th. You
Sounds
did
like
such a great job as an events planner. I want you to take care of my 75th, okay?
Got it.
All right.
One day when it's safe.
Yes. So while we're waiting for other questions or anything like that, I'm just pulling out some quotes in here from her interviews. And she has a really interesting quote on here. And I don't know if it was something that she wanted us to really think about, or if she was kind of giving us underlining rhetoric, if you will. But she said in here, she said, these days, what not necessarily frightens me, but makes me anxious is that we would see the Ku Klux Klan and some other separatist groups really openly marching and protesting, and even David Duke to go so far as to try to be president.
Yes.
Wow.
I think, she said, to think that kind of attitude exists in a free country is amazing. And yet it happens because we're so free that oftentimes freedom is detrimental. I think, I think. But then we have to be all, but then we have to all be free to speak and to act as we think, as long as we are not injuring other people. Profound.
Yes.
Profound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know in that same interview, I remember that, and she expressed a little concern about young people and parents giving them too much and not letting them learn on their own, like they were getting a pass. She was really concerned about that, about young people not, having the strict upbringing and learning the rules of life. So, and she didn't mind talking about that either. That was Caribel.
Yeah, she has great, strong characteristics of just, hey, It is what it is, and we're not going to allow you to fall through the cracks of what the world wants to put you at or anything like that. And for her to really embrace that and stand in her truth, and regardless of what others think, and and move forward and make things happen, we need that. We need that. We need that. That's how do you think that, Martin Luther King during the civil rights, he was scared to death doing all of that. But he knew the reason. Mhm.
Absolutely.
So here's on here, it says, I can't remember. There's a question on here, Jeff. It says on here, I can't remember, but has Caribel been the subject of a cemetery walk?
Not here locally, no.
Okay, might need to add that to our list with Dr. Covington, I think. Maybe 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 some sort of okay, so there's another question, or yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, that's just a statement on a community chat here. But yes, there seems to be something we have to do, whether we have a placard or a bust of some sort of these people, great people, would be really, really good to know. And anybody out there who knows where to start, just say the word or email. We have people we can start working on it. And I'll be one of them to help, though my calendar is inundated, but I will help.
It sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So the cemetery, I mean, okay, so what was that question again?
They have a cemetery walk that really, where they walk through and talk about, I actually did it when I first
Yeah, I've
moved here.
attended that. Do you have to be in the cemetery to have that?
There's some discussion back and forth now where we, and I didn't want to just speak prematurely, but in the future, we may look at doing that. Yeah, but basically, those who are buried in the cemetery are the characters that are featured at this point.
Right, because she was cremated.
And they have to be, well, yeah, and they have to be, they have to
In the cemetery.
so many years. They have
Oh,
to be so
okay.
many years as well too. And you can see the issues with that. So many years have to pass. Yeah. But we do.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Beverly.
Yes.
Has the McLean County History Museum ever thought about, especially right after she passed, ever thought about or considered purchasing her home? And I guess I'm really thinking about it now because I don't think I realized that her ashes are on that property. And to me, that's almost like sacred ground. And I know that I believe that it was vacant for a good little while, and then someone purchased the home. But, has the museum ever thought about purchasing that home and turning it into maybe some type of historical annex, housing different types of Black history things, and making a memorial out of the area where she is buried, because I didn't know she was buried on that property. And like, it almost seems sacrilegious to have somebody living there who may not even know the history of the home and the fact that someone is buried on that property.
Yes, I can speak to that. The McLean County Historical Society got away from that kind of a thing years ago for several different reasons. We used to have the Stevenson home on Washington Street, and after so many years, that was sold. a lot of what happens is with that is there's a trend where these properties or these historic sites are in the hands of private individuals. So that being said, um, it could possibly be something that the Bloomington Normal Black History Project could look at, or something of that nature. But you'd have to go through this. If you want to do it properly, you'd have to go through the steps of certifying in a state historical site, or yeah. And there's some hoops to go through with that as well. But yeah, that's certainly a possibility.
Well, Jeff, this is Cleo again. You know that the fellowship hall is Caribel Washington's fellowship hall at Weymouth now.
Yes.
Yeah, Caribel Washington Fellowship Hall at Weymouth AME Church. So we never can forget her.
Yeah, but I like those ideas that people are thinking, just,
Oh yeah, those are broader.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, Tiffany, we're right at 3:30, 3:31. I'm certainly here to continue, but I know others maybe have other plans. We do have the choices activity. We can either do that, or we can do it at some other time. 'Cause I know I want to be respectful of people's time. But the good part about this is that we spent most of the time actually conversing with each other, and that's a good thing. So.
And
I agree.
sharing.
Yes, sharing is caring.
Mhm.
Awesome. Christy, do you happen to have the choices available?
I do.
Awesome.
And Jeff, this first one, I couldn't write the entire question. It was too long. So you might want to
Yes.
read the entire question. But here is the poll.
Let's see. You're a white manager of a Bloomington restaurant in 1951. A light-skinned Black woman regularly eats lunch at your restaurant, but today she came in with her 3 children who have very dark skin. Of course, she could pass for white, but the kids could not. You usually serve only white customers, and basically, we're just looking at what do you think happened there, or what would you do? What would happen? It's in 1951. And I'll get my sheets over here. Oh, 33.
Boy, that's a hard one.
All right, I'll let this go for about another 20 seconds. If everybody wants to make sure their answer is submitted, there's about half of you left to answer.
I'm presuming this is what we think they would have done in 1951, not what we would do today.
Either
Right.
or.
Oh, no.
What you would do today would probably be a lot different, but that makes it tougher, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tougher and ashamed.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and show you the results.
Okay. Okay, 70% say they would serve the whole family since you served the mother before. Yeah, that would be the noble thing to do.
Right.
Like I say, we'll go through all three, but then we'll give you some context at the end. But I'll tell you the answer to that one was they would have told the woman that her children could not eat there. She could eat there, but they could not. Okay.
Once they found out she had black children, would she be able to eat there after that?
Apparently so. She could pass for white.
Well, also, if they had allowed her children to eat there, then would that have opened up the door for them to serve all dark-skinned people?
It could, yeah. I would think so. I would think so. That's a good question. Let's go ahead and yeah. You want to try the next one, Christy?
Yeah, I just launched the poll. Can you
Okay.
see it, Jeff, when it comes up?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so now we're kind of progressing here, right? Well, let's see what it makes a difference. I thought that was interesting, so I had to try that. This is number 2 out of 3. You're a white manager of a restaurant in Bloomington in 1955. A very famous actor, black actor, comes to eat in your restaurant. Of course, your policy is not to serve blacks. Do you tell him the policy and refuse service, offer him food to go, or seat him separately from the rest of the patrons? Tell us what you think.
I need an other option.
What, while we're waiting, what other option would you like?
Okay, I'm really trying to put myself in the manager's position at that time.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
for a famous black person to come, you know, that might generate some more revenue for him if he allowed that person to come. And so, you know, I'm thinking bottom line, dollars and cents. And so I would kind of go with number 3, but I wouldn't sit him off in the corner. I'd make sure people were there to see him.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that evidently so much of that went on. Were they even interested in the dollar? Even though he was a famous black. I answered one way, but now I'm rethinking my answer because I'm thinking that if the person, the manager, even recognized that that was a famous black actor or person, would they? I'm thinking maybe they would have told him the rules, but still made him a nice lunch to go. Because I don't think the famous person probably would have sat in the corner. But he could have.
Let's just say it's Sidney Poitier.
Pardon?
Let's just say it's Sidney
I'll say it.
Poitier. Okay,
Well, si-
right.
well, since he had worked with the nuns, had he made that movie? Maybe if they had seen that and knew about that, then they'd make an exception one time.
Mm-mm.
That's what I'm
Mm-mm.
saying. Diane said she'd sit with him, and I would too.
In a heartbeat.
All right, we'll give this about another 15 seconds. And then I will close the poll.
And of course, back then you could get food, but you'd have to go to the back. So, or the bus driver would have to get off. The white bus driver would get off and go inside and get it for you, bring it to the bus.
Okay. Okay. It's about a third says offering food to go. And 11 would, of course, have probably thought they would be refused service. And see them separately from the rest of your patrons. It's 56%. And actually, the 56%, that's correct. They chose to seat him separately from the rest of the patrons. And we'll do one more, and I'll give you some, like I said, I'll give you content to all three, give you a little bit more meat to the story. Yeah. Okay, the third and final one. You're a Black woman living in Bloomington. There is an opening on the city council, and you would really like to participate in the city government. No Black person has ever served on the council. And you ran once before and you lost. So are you going to run again, regardless of the outcome, or decide not to, or campaign as hard as you can and go for it? Take your pick.
Well, this was an easy one for everyone. Everybody answered very quickly, which I'm pleased to see. And just in case anybody else wants to hop in there, I'll give it about another 15 seconds.
Okay. I like that. That's the YWCA spirit there, isn't it? Campaign as hard as you can. That's exactly what happened. So I'll go back and review really quick. In the scenario, I'll get my numbers together here. The white manager who told the woman that her children can't eat there. In that scenario, it says Black people had to wait behind most restaurants for food to take home. Wait out back. One mother had light enough skin that she ate in a diner alone, but couldn't bring her dark-skinned children with her. So that was correct. The second scenario, we moved up to 1955. It's white manager, restaurant Bloomington, famous Black actor. And most of you said that you would seat him separately from the rest of the patrons. And we'll see definitely what happened. Internationally known Black singer and actor William Warfield was served at a Bloomington restaurant after they put up a screen between him and the other diners. So they put a screen between the two and he could eat inside with the rest of the patrons. 1955. Okay. And the last one, what would you do? The black woman, and everybody said 100%, go for it. Well, good for you. Eva Jones lost the race for city council in 1970, but became the first black person to serve when she won in 1979. Eva Gator Mae Jones, City Council, Bloomington, 1979.
Eva Jones was the cousin of my in-laws.
Okay.
Yes. I kind of thought that might be who we may be talking about.
Yes, you know her son Ronnie.
Yes.
Ronnie Jones. Yeah.
Yes.
He's a friend of mine as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. Any thoughts from anyone? Still on? Thoughts?
If I might, yes. I'm Diane Cosentino, and I knew Caribel from Curcio, as did Carolyn Gray. And I think, we've discussed this whole time about the toughness that she had, and she was so strong and so compassionate about all of the things that she believed. But I can tell you from personal experience that she could envelop you in a hug that was next to none. The compassion would bloom over, and you'd think you were being hugged by Jesus himself because of how she was, and she would listen and let you come to your own decisions. She would encourage without being bossy in most instances in the time I knew her. And I always used to say to her sister, Catherine, and because Catherine was the quiet one and Caribel was there for everybody, and Catherine says, it's okay. I just kind of let her go on her own, and she just takes off, wherever she wants to go. Both of them were women that I am so blessed for having known. And I just wanted to say that there's something else. They were just amazing people. So thank you for having this today.
Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for hanging in there with us. Day 3. Yeah, I'd be happy to do it again. I've learned a lot. For sure.
Wonderful. Jeff, thank you so much. This has been an amazing week, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again in the future. And I thank everyone again for coming and participating. It's been a wonderful, wonderful series. And again, these will be posted on our website by tomorrow, ywcamclean.org. And then it will be under our community training tab or that /community training. So everybody have a great day.
Before you go,
Jeff has something else.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to do this earlier, but we just got so involved in the discussion. That was great. Would you put up the last slide of Barb?
Oh, of course, of course.
Did you share that?
Give me just one moment. I'm sorry.
Did you all show all the slides?
Yeah, we just have one more.
Oh, okay.
Something just came to me as another woman, since we're working with the YWCA this week, and another fantastic public servant and humanitarian. I just wanted to acknowledge her.
Sorry, Jeff. I shouldn't have closed it.
I may have it. You think you have it?
Yeah, it's opening right now.
Oh, okay, then I won't try to open it. And this woman, right out of college, was a dispatcher for the city of Bloomington. And she also served as deputy city manager. So a lot of you would probably know who she is. I know Emily Bell would know who she is.
Barb.
You
Yeah.
betcha.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge her here. She's just kind of been my strength this week.
Mhm.
That, you know, with so much going on, I was like, how are we going to pull this off? And I just thought about Barb. You know, as you know, Barb passed away in November 7th. Just it's a short illness, sudden illness, I would say, because nobody had any idea that she was ill. And I spoke with Barb 2 weeks prior to her passing because she was my garden partner at the West Bloomington Revitalization Project, West Side Community Gardens. And I called Barb up, and she loved collard greens. And she had a petals group at Western Avenue Community Center, the girls group, through links. And we taught them all how to grow greens and all that. And we had some classes and stuff, and she helped me out with that. Well, 2 weeks before she passed, I called her up, and it was the end of the season, and we had these greens. And I says, Barb, would you like some greens? And she says, Jeff, I don't even know why you asked me that. You know I do. So I met her at the garden, and we picked a box of collard greens for her and put it in her car, and we chopped it up probably 5 or 10 minutes. And we usually talk for like 20 minutes or so. And we talked for about 10 minutes. And that was the last time that I saw her. So I'm just thinking about her this week. And for those of you that knew her, you know what a great person she was. History is power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Everybody have a great week and hope to see you all very soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Hi, Beverly. This is Cleo. How are you?
I'm fine, Cleo. How are you?
Good. Miss seeing you around, Beverly.
Girl, I'm on house arrest till I get it back.
I know. Oh, I get my first shot tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
I'm still on house arrest after that. It don't mean, you know.
I understand.
Yeah.
We still have to be careful.
Right.
Okay, take care.
Okay.